You are listening to the Horse Radio Network, part of the Equine Network family.
Hi, I'm Jennifer Wood.
And I'm Jennifer Connor.
From Equestrian Businesswomen, and you're listening to Equestrian B2B, the podcast that brings together industry leaders, entrepreneurs, and equestrians for conversations about how they build and sustain a successful business.
On today's show, we speak to Dr. Meg Green, an award-winning veterinarian and business strategist, about advice for business owners and leaders for productivity and effective communication.
Dr. Meg Green is an award-winning veterinarian and business strategist. Dr. Green has a diverse background and consistent record of accomplishments in both clinical practice as well as in the animal health industry. Her proven ability to think strategically, leverage relationships, and implement programs that drive organizational growth, efficiency, and profitability are second to none. Additionally, Dr. Green is a certified coach and speaker with the Maxwell Leadership Team, which has been recognized as one of the world's best in class for leadership development and training.
Throughout her career, the key to Dr. Green's success has been how she values putting people first and optimizing best quality medicine for her patients. When given the opportunity to work with Dr. Green, you will immediately see her passion and unique ability to empower and equip both individuals and teams to achieve high levels of productivity and effective communication, all while practicing best medicine.
Stomach ulcers make you feel bad. All Natural Ulcer Relief makes you feel good. With no known side effects and a 100% money-back guarantee, why not give it a try? ulcerrelief.com.
So, Dr. Green, we're going to start out and talk a little bit about your equine background. And it's okay if I call you Meg?
Absolutely. Please do.
Great. Thanks. So to get us started, why don't you just give us a little bit of your background in the equine industry?
Sure. So thank you, first of all, for having me on the show today. It's an honor and a pleasure to be with you all. And, from the time I was a child, I had horses and was horse crazy girl and grew up in Georgia and knew that eventually I wanted to go to veterinary school. And so, grew up showing competitively and raising horses, and then went on to college and continued to, love having the horses in my life, and became a veterinarian, and had the opportunity to graduate. And once I graduated from veterinary school, I went to do an internship at Ridden Equine Hospital. And really, it was the best 2 years of my life in Lexington, Kentucky. It was truly foundational to my career as a veterinarian. I learned from the best of the best. And, being around the doctors, many of which have written many of the textbooks and or make decisions, serving on different boards and regulatory boards or guidelines, and really helping to grow the industry into what it is today. I felt like I was working amongst giants, oftentimes having my own imposter syndrome, if I'm honest. I didn't really always think I was worthy of being there, but I certainly appreciate the ability for them to lean in and really teach me as a young veterinarian. And from there, I also had an interest in going into industry. And so I knew that, up and coming technology was something that was really important to me. And so I continued to practice. And from there, went into coming into industry, and I practiced going into with that. I went into work for one of the large pharma companies and did that for about 6 years. And really, that was another foundational step for me to be able to see veterinary life on the other side from the industry perspective. And from there, I started my own consulting business, and found that, in doing what the experience that I'd gotten from traveling all over the country, averaging about 40 weeks out of the year, I got a lot of perspective on how, different practices were run, different training facilities were run, interacting with trainers and owners, and really hearing, what they needed and what they were looking for, and wanting to be able to, provide solutions for them, and really coaching them. And so that's really where, my, experience as far as, wanting to start my own business and think about coaching and leadership development really began, is really on the road and seeing, lots of people craving this information, just didn't know where to look for it. So
what do you think some of the similarities are between being a vet and having your coaching business?
I think being a veterinarian, we're asked to look at things from a perspective, of getting a diagnostic, trying to run that test, identify, what's going on, with our patient in front of us, And, whether that be, blood work or x-rays or ultrasound, and, working through that process. And I feel it's a lot of the same, when I'm working with my clients and different organizations that I've worked with, a lot of it is identifying what is the problems, identifying the gaps that you have, where are you now and where would you like to move, and what can we do to get you there? And that's really what my role as being a coach and a mentor, it really helps, I feel like that really helps me serve a purpose. And I think you have to have purpose and passion in anything that you do. And I find that in the equine industry, everyone really does have purpose and passion, but sometimes they don't always know exactly which way to go. And so that's really what I try to do, is really help move that, close that gap and help people get to where they want to go.
Yeah. I think we talk about that a lot is, people are kind of guided by their passion in the equestrian industry. And then, if their plan A doesn't work out, then what? And, or they are so guided by passion that they, get worked off their feet and, or, people use that passion and they aren't really either compensated for it correctly, or they get burnt out, or, lots of different things. So, that's a really interesting point is, yeah, you've got to have passion, but what's the purpose behind it, and what are you going to do with it? And how are you going to continue to be successful with it? Can you explain what the Maxwell Leadership Group is and your involvement with it?
Sure. So the Maxwell Leadership Group is a leadership development group that was founded by Dr. John C. Maxwell, who is a world-renowned leader. And whenever you look up leadership, he's pretty much the one who's written the definition of what it is, and really foundational as in his coaching world. And so I was given a book actually when I was in high school by him, and it was called The 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership. And that was a book I got as a senior graduating and was told to read it by my uncle. And it was a book that really made a huge impact on my life and really taught me, some really ground rules, if you will, becoming a leader. And so I think that was, to me, it was something that I continue like wanting to learn more about leadership development. And in doing so, it just kind of led me down a path of, identifying. So really, I had the opportunity in 2019 to participate, what they call the International Maxwell Institute, and was invited to be a part of that group, and basically went to a week's worth of intensive training and met with leaders from around the world. So this particular coaching group, once you get invited in to be a part of, there's over 30,000 coaches, and it's worldwide and global. And so being able to see different perspectives from all different walks of life, has really been interesting for me, because I feel like, overall we may have one perspective, and mine is, coming from clinical practice and veterinary medicine and the equine industry. I have that perspective, but I don't always have, say, a perspective that comes from a real estate agent, and what they're dealing with in a client, and, or say a doctor, that's an MD, and they're doing some similar things. Concierge medicine is becoming popular in the human side. And so like one of my colleagues is a concierge doctor. So it's always nice to learn, from what they're doing. And cross-pollinating. And so I think that's one of the beauties of, seeing that, but also looking at, people that are with Fortune 500 companies that sit, in the C-suite, in this group. I think it's just been a great way for me to learn and expand my knowledge as well as my network. And
was that the impetus for starting your own consulting business? And
so it was. So I think the biggest thing for me is, as a doctor, I feel like, I had, that need to have some type of certification. There were a lot of things I was doing coaching wise, but not necessarily formal, if you will. Mm-hmm. And so, we always get kind of, and it's probably just, it's not really me personally, but probably just more of like when you're looking from the outside, who, gives you the power to say these things. And they're looking, when you're looking for clients and wanting to talk about like, what have you gotten certified in and what have you done? I think that's one of the biggest things is I was looking around for opportunities to be able to become certified and learn more about leadership development, more in a more formal way, I guess, and being able to kind of package it, because I was doing a lot of coaching, in my travel and experience, working, alongside, various, different technicians, veterinarians, owners, trainers, even, small business people that were in the industry, whether it be like a tax shop that I was working alongside of, or a feed store owner, always, people are always asking me like, well, what would you do if I wasn't doing this? What would you think I could do? Or, people that, maybe don't get into veterinary school and looking at alternatives to be able to go and do something else. I think that's really important.
Yeah.
Because to your point earlier, we get so passionate about something, we lose sight of anything else. If this doesn't work out, what am I going to do? And then you have that feeling of failure. And the matter is that that's not always, failure isn't always bad. I've always been taught, my dad taught me early on, he says, if you're going to fail fast. And so the thing is like, I try to do that. If I'm going to fail, let's just do it fast. And the other thing is, being ready. If it's, sometimes I think that oftentimes we procrastinate because we don't think we're ready for something and we're not sure, but ready is really a myth. You just really need to go, take action. If you're taking action, something's going to happen one way or the other. If you're just sitting still, life's going to pass you by.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's one of the points. One of our early episodes was about being ready, like for a job and getting ready for a job, and how women often want to be 110% qualified before they just do it, where men they could be 30% qualified and they're like, yeah, I'm just going to put my name in the hat. So I think that, yeah, you're right. Like ready is kind of a myth. You have to just keep going forward,
100% agree with you on that.
How did your business evolve?
So basically, with me in the business, I felt like once I got the certification, I just started going through and following up with colleagues that I had coached and really wanted to be able to follow up with them, but also just started putting my name out in, different aspects to be able to become a speaker. And I started speaking on, a lot of the things that I'd learned in Maxwell Institute, specifically everyone communicates, but few connect. And that's probably one of the things that I've really taught so much of, and really identifying ways to connect with different types of people and expanding your network and how you do that and the processes by which have been successful, and so I think that for me is probably one of the biggest ways I've done it, is either speaking and or following up with people that I've coached in the past. I've also engaged with my different animal health, industry partners and things like that to be able to come and speak to, when they have a value added program. I've spoken, on those platforms. I've also spoken at different chamber activities, local chamber activities, as well as been involved with different organizations, from a women's speaking network to also being involved in different church community activities and that kind of thing, to be able to, just share the knowledge. I think the biggest thing is that being a trusted resource is probably one of the biggest things I want to be able to provide, is that I want to bring value, and I want people to know that you may not know your next step, but it's okay to not know, but it's not okay to sit there forever. And so let's get you to that next step and let's try to close that gap. And what are, the steps? It looks overwhelming a lot of times, but, I think that's one of the biggest things, when I work with people. I have one client that we can talk about later, as far as an example, but I think just understanding what that looks like and how you might go about that.
I think that's great, because a lot of times I think many things in your life look like this giant mountain to climb, and knowing how to break down the steps to get to the next place is a difficult thing. An example for me is my dog had CCL surgery earlier this year, and the first 3 days of it, I was like, we're never going to make it through. This is the first thing ever. I was like having total mental breakdown. I'm in tears. My husband's like, will you relax? And like, now we don't even know she had it. Right. But the first 3 days were so hard. I was like, oh, it's such a big mountain to climb, but now it's like irrelevant.
Yeah.
So I did want to ask, so do you teach more about leadership or networking, would you say?
I would say probably more about leadership, because I think leadership is one of the things that I coach to a lot. And just as a secondary thing, I also follow up with networking, because I think as you become a better leader, your network expands.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah. How do you balance being a veterinarian and your coaching business?
Great question. It really is. And I think for me, it's prioritization and understanding what it is that, I have to do. And one of the things I do for me personally is I get up every day and I start at 5 o'clock. I've done that, for a very long time. And I feel like that's one of the most common things when you look across what leaders do. Leaders, people that are successful and want to get out or have this entrepreneurial spirit, I believe, and they're very regimented in the fact that, they get up early, they start their day, they have a process by which they do. And in that, many of them, there's been research that's shown that they sit down and usually they take 15 minutes in that first hour and are able to work like a whole system out. Like, what am I going to do today? Where am I going to go? What are my priorities? And I think that's one of the things that I've been able to do in learning to develop that and becoming more dedicated to it. And if I miss that 5 o'clock time, and just having that for that first hour of my day, it really does kind of throw me off. I'm not going to lie. And being able to have that helps me set my day. And then once I'm able to do that, then I can really prioritize what's most important and how I go about that. But, being able to be a veterinarian and have certain times that I'll have certain days of the week that I'm able to do that, and or hours within the day. And then the other times, that I'm doing my consulting business and working with my clients on the coaching side of the business. I think that's, just sort of kind of identifying that. For me, it's really basically having time blocks, if you will, and being able to prioritize those time blocks based on the need.
For me, I can get out of bed if I have a horse show. I can get up. If I feel like have some relevance to my day, I feel like it's much easier to get up knowing that I have a plan of action and what way it's going to go than if I don't have appointments until noon and I don't have to be anywhere and I don't have to get in the car until, 10 o'clock in the morning. Sometimes I'm like, I feel useless, but I know if I have a purpose to get up, then I feel like it's not a problem to get up in the morning and get going.
I totally agree.
I'm not a morning person, so I'm not with you there. I understand it and I appreciate it. And I struggle every day, getting up and getting the kids up and getting them to school. And I have no desire to get up any earlier than I absolutely have to.
I understand.
You also work late into the evening.
I do
too, a lot, and
I work after they go to bed and
yeah. And when you're doing horse shows and they're running late and you have to do press releases. I understand that. Believe me, if I don't go to bed until, midnight or 1 o'clock, I am not bouncing out of the bed at 5 a.m.
Right.
I understand that too. Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. But I also think, it's part of recognizing your work patterns and when you work best and what point in life you are right now, and okay, I can't do this right now, but if I'm older and I can't sleep very well or I'm not sleeping in, then it could change in 5 years or something. And just knowing who you are and where you are in that point in life, I think is important to have that awareness.
Yeah. And I think Jen too, even in college, you were more of a person who did your work in the evenings, right? And got everything ready at night and would work late into the night.
Well, I'd always study the night before the test, right?
Yeah.
Not any time before.
That was me too. Me too. We got other priorities. Don't worry.
Everybody was like, why haven't you been studying for? I'm like, oh, well, and I do fine. It worked for me.
Oh, I can't tell you how many times I was up until 2 or 3 a.m. putting together a presentation or something the last minute, till the last minute when I had to go to class sometimes at 8 a.m.
I like to think I've gotten a little better about that, but yeah, sometimes it's who you are. It's hard to change that.
Yeah.
We've talked to people about that as well, as changing habits, and it takes a lot of work.
And you know what? Even when you change habits, though, sometimes so I was really good for 2 years about walking and working out. And granted, it was COVID, so my travel was a lot less than what it is now for work. But I was great. And now I'm back to my old habits. I'm yeah, and I'm for 2 years, I was great, but now I'm struggling getting, now that I'm back into traveling as much as I was. And I'm like, how did I slip out of it?
Totally.
It's the season, kind of to what Jennifer was just saying, is being able to think about the seasons and how we adapt and different things are going to prioritize differently. We're able to do. And I think that was our outlet. Everybody got really good at working out because we had those outlets and we didn't have anywhere else to go. So we needed to do something. And so, but now that we are able to do other things, we've shifted, back over, the pendulum has shifted. And I think, whenever that happens for any of us, it wasn't a normal routine for an extended period of time, even though 2 years seems like it was. When you add these other variables in, that's when it kind of gets out of balance, if you will. And so I think that's one of the biggest things, understanding, prioritization and the variables that are, impacting your life within that season. I know for me, that's probably one of the hardest things of being a veterinarian, but being a mom being able to, have my, take my daughter and do the things that I want her to be involved in, but also not be so overly involved that, nobody can enjoy what she's doing, herself included. I think that's one of the biggest things is that oftentimes we just overfill our plates.
Yes.
We have this, need to be busy all the time. And I think that's one of the biggest adjustments. I think we all kind of had a reset, if you will, with COVID. But at the same time, that reset is, I feel like we're now in a different zone of like, okay, different season now over here. We're out of COVID necessarily, but at the same time, it was like this need to get back in. And then all of a sudden life is happening again. And here we are just going 90 miles an hour before we even realize it.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I felt completely overwhelmed when I really had to dig back in and start traveling and going places and doing all the things and balancing what I had taken on during COVID, like a couple of ponies that I was riding. And so I definitely struggled in the beginning to not feel overwhelmed.
Yeah. We wanted to know what are some of the top tips that you could offer to business owners? What are some of the things that you either start out with someone or, things that you find yourself repeating a lot?
Sure. So I think the first thing for me is understanding goals. I think, you've got to have goals and not just have a goal, but really have a goal that is, that you can measure and like having a SMART goal and, identifying, what that looks like and, being able to, see that, okay, if I'm going to set this goal, what am I doing? Why am I setting this goal? And what am I actually going to achieve in this goal? And that's probably one of the hardest. It's really a basic thing. It's a very basic concept, but thinking about what that means is so critical to really coaching many of my people. So for example, I have a client that, she's wanting to transition right now. She's a trainer. She's at one facility now, and we met earlier this year and we walked through, she said, I really want to start, my own business and I want to move. I have an opportunity to go and, work at another facility. And now I'm basically going to be the head trainer, but I'm a little nervous. I don't know what to expect. I don't know how to think about what would I do? Like, how do I break this down? And just, you could just see the overwhelm in her face, whether she was going to lease a facility or she was going to, how she was going to get other horses that, for her lesson program, she has a couple already, but, there was lots of things that she knew that she needed to have in place. And so really trying to coach her through that overwhelm and identify, okay, let's start here, and let's kind of break it down as far as what's your timeline, understanding that timeline. So if you're at a facility now, when do you renew your contract? When does that happen? And so, you need to be thinking about this. And this was almost 8 months ago when I started working with her and being able to identify, what that timeline was. And so I actually saw her this morning. I actually went and did acupuncture on a couple of their horses at that farm. And she met last week with the owner of the facility that she's currently at and had the conversation about, I'm going to be leaving. I'm going out on my own. And she was really anxious about it at first. But she said, once I got it out on the table and I had my plan and you had set the goals, we had gone through that. It was something that, it was wonderful to see her get so excited about that she's going, within the next 90 days, she'll transition out of that facility into her very own. And where she's going now, they're already starting to talk about plans for what they're doing. And so she was sharing that with me. And so I looked at her this morning and I said, look, do you realize 8 months ago, we started talking about this and you have now not only accomplished what you want to, but you're moving into that next phase, that next step. And I couldn't be more excited for her.
And before you mentioned talking about lots of people know how to communicate, but they don't know how to connect. Could you expand on that a little bit?
Absolutely. So I think a lot of people in general, they talk a lot, but do they really remember? Do they make that connection? As a veterinarian, one of the things I've always tried to do is, yes, I'm here to work on your horse and I'm here to know your horse, but I also look for other things that we could connect on. And so, I'd look to see, do you have children? I would look to see, do you have your dog? What kind of dogs do you like? What are some activities, that you were interested in? And really what I teach is what's called the Ford concept. So if you can connect on 4 different points, what you don't have to use, you can use all of them, or you can use just one of them. Ford is an acronym, which stands for family, occupation, recreation, and dreams. So if I can connect on family, occupation, recreation, or dreams, and find a way to connect with you on that, then I feel like that becomes that next level of a relationship. And so those are ways that we can talk about. So just, whether that your dreams are you want to go and become this, or whether you want to reconnect on recreation. Maybe you like to go and scuba dive. And guess what? I do too. So, those are things that we can expand upon that don't just have to do with why I'm here and right in front of you. And I think that helps leave that lasting impression, also grows your network and helps to, business oftentimes becomes very regimented, I think, on certain things that you do. But if you can kind of get out of that norm and start connecting on a different level, it helps to be able to expand that connection and, really overall just bring more purpose and more meaning to your life and how you can interact with those people on a higher level.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think so often people aren't listening to listen, they're listening to respond. Mm-hmm. So they're not making those deep connections because they're thinking about the next question or, the next direction and not really looking at listening to what you have to say in order to make those deep connections. So I think reminding people, that maybe you can expand your network better and have better connections with people if you really stop and listen to what they're saying.
Mm-hmm. I 100% agree with that. Because I think oftentimes when we do listen to respond, we're not allowing that, you're not being present. And I think that's the other thing is be present in that moment. Wherever your feet are planted, be present. We have a tendency to always have our cell phones out, to have a tendency to be looking and scrolling and or texting or whatever that case may be. But I think oftentimes we miss those moments because we're looking at something else. We're not looking at what's right in front of us. And, if we can't be in the moment, then what are we doing here to begin with?
Well, and I think that expanding your network is really important because you never know who's going to have a connection that you can need, or, they might need you for something. And, ultimately we want to be able to help each other out. So the more you listen to people and have those connections, then the better you are going to be like, oh, this person, like you said, likes to do this and I like to do this, but then at some point you might need them for that.
100%.
And I feel like there's a growing feeling that customers should be able to have some sort of connection with where they're getting products or services from, especially if it's more of like a small business and a one-on-one service that you're getting from someone. They want to feel like you care about them, and you're not just a faceless number in what they do. And that sort of connection, like you're talking about with your clients, I think definitely could help lots of business owners and be able to, show through that and through their customer service, why people should use them and why they're better than their competitors. I think that applies across the board.
Well, and I also think it can even go into marketing, right? And helping you know your market and know your customers so that, like me, a salesperson, has resources that we know, like we're investing in our veterinarians. They feel like we're investing in it and giving good customer service because we understand them.
Yeah. And would you give different advice, or what kind of advice would you give to someone who's thinking about starting a business?
I think whenever you start a business and you start something new, is going in, identifying 3 to 5 people that you admire that have gone before you and are really doing a good job at what they're doing, and ask them. I think just sitting down and taking time to learn from them and ask what their pain points are, but more importantly, what are some of the successes that they've had and what's led them to become that. And I think finding that out and finding a mentor in one of those 3 to 5 different businesses will really help you to expand, and also have someone that when you have moments of doubt, because I can share with you as a business owner myself, this can be a lonely road. And a lot of times you feel like you're on an island and you just don't know, especially you have you have network, but at the same time, you don't always know what another person in the same shoes are dealing with and that kind of thing. And so I think for me, when I went into coaching, that's really why I leaned into the Maxwell leadership, because I had a group of coaches that were doing the things, and many of them had gone on and done things that were far beyond what I had done, but really wanted to do that. And so how could I go about that? And so, I have one of my dearest friends from high school. She has spoken, with the Dale Carnegie Group for years. And so I leaned into her and I said, help me understand, if I want to get into coaching, what is the best methodology that I could actually get that. And she says, Meg, my recommendation is to continue to network, but go and get some type of certification, whatever that may be. And because that's really how do you get qualified to be on the speaking and a tour and that kind of thing? And some of it is through your qualifications, but it's the network. Because anytime you go into these groups, you really start to expand, because to your point, Jen, it's like being able to have, I might have connected on one thing, but now they're asking me for something else. And so they may call me because I'm a veterinarian, but then they find out I'm a coach. And so then I get an opportunity to coach somebody else that, is looking for a lot of the same things that I was looking for. And so I think being able to find that mentor, find that group of people that you admire, and then try to form your own identity within because it's not all going to work for you. Let's be honest. Everybody's a little bit different. And so I think for me, that's kind of where I've been able to do it, because as a business owner, there's a lot of decisions that you have to make. But at the end of the day, that's the beauty of it. You make those decisions and you're able to be able to move forward one way or the other. And again, if you can fail fast, and that way you can course correct and go a different direction if need be.
Do you have a client success story that you can share with us?
I do. I have lots of them, actually. Really, really, really endearing. It's probably one of my favorite things to share. And so I have a veterinarian that came to me when I was in industry. I'd actually been working with her as a client for that particular company. And we went and did gastroscopies and scoping horses and being able to look for ulcers. And so we were with her at her practice, and she asked me then, she said, how did you get into the industry? What did you do to get here? I'm kind of at a point in my life, a different season, and I'm looking for possibly, moving into industry. I want to potentially sell my practice one day and be able to do something like that. I've always wanted to do it. And so I sat down, and this is before I was a coach. And so I just kind of said, okay, well, let's talk about it. What is your experience? And so we went through, and I said, these are some things I think, you can start to apply for, but more importantly, let's look at your resume. Let's see how we can put this together formally, because she'd been a business owner for, 15 years, and she didn't have a resume that she'd really updated along the way. So this is basically that, get your resume together. Let's look at it. Let's try to coach you through that. What does that look like? And so, and reviewed that. And then, we continued to have that relationship. And so actually when I became a coach, she called me back and she said, was there any way that you'd be willing to sit down and walk me through, this interview process? Because I'm actually going in for an interview with the company. And so we sat down, and, at this point I literally sat in her shoes before, and I could say, okay, this is what they're going to ask. These are the things you prepare for. And so, she went through 3 rounds of interviews, and I just said, the biggest thing you want to do is position yourself in this role as a tech services veterinarian is you want to basically work as an assistant coach to, say, like a sales manager, because you're there to back them up. And if you can position yourself that way, you can be the best offensive coordinator or the best defensive coordinator. You may not be the head coach, but that's okay. Because at the end of the day, if you can back your team up, and she loved it because she loves football. And so just like I do. And so I think it was one of these things where we could use these analogies. And so she went in and she killed it. And she did so good. And so she called me back up and she said, she's like, I feel really, really good about this. And, when I look back at that scenario, there's not a time that goes by, she's come to me, she got the job successfully, and she continues to shine. And I actually got a chance to talk to her not that long ago at AAP, and when we were there. And so she's just like, I'm so grateful for what you've done for me to be able to do the job and do the things that I love to do now. And, and so for me, that's what I want to see. I want to see people succeed. I want to see them do well. And, that was, to me, she moved out of practice into industry and got what she wanted. Now, did that happen quickly? No, not necessarily. That was really almost like a 5-year deal. And part of that was just because she wasn't quite ready to move out of practice yet, because we had some things to get her ready for it and say, this is what you're going to do. There's some steps that you're going to need to think about. But then once she kind of got through that and then was ready, then she really became, ready for that moment. And it was in that season that she was able to, ultimately fulfill her dreams and move and close that gap like we talked about, and being able to do it. And so, and I think being a coach, it's just so fun to watch people, because really, it's really understanding and agreeing and comprehending and exploring what my clients want. And this is what we're agreeing to talk about. This is what I'm understanding that you want to get out of said session, exploring how we might go about that. And then ultimately recapping everything that we've talked about, and then acting on it, getting them to act. I think that's the biggest thing is people, my clients, many of them They have great ideas. They want to do big things. And I love that about that because that's me. But I just need you to take the next right step. Don't need all the steps, but just take the next right one.
What's usually the length of time that you work with someone?
I would say on average, at least six months to a year.
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah, that's an extended amount of time to be able to, I think, put a lot of things into practice and see, measurable change. Like, is there a lot of follow-up once that initial time period has passed?
If there is, so typically, I take on a coaching client and, we'll do an initial assessment interview, sort of decide if this is a good fit for each other. And then from there, we set up sort of what, based on their timeline and kind of what they're looking for. At least, I'll do either weekly or biweekly meetings with them. And we do that really hardcore for the first 90 days, if you will. And that way we're making those actionable steps and they're learning to kind of, identify what is needed. And then from there, we sort of transition to sort of what they need, whether that be biweekly or monthly, that kind of thing, just based on, where we're tracking. And it's really just a checks and balances for me and just understanding that they are moving that needle forward. And that's what that's my intent as your coach, is not to tell you what to do, but just hold you accountable. And that accountability partner, and being able to do that, but maybe even giving perspective that they may not always have thought about, and going back to the drawing board. If it doesn't seem like it's the best idea, then I say, okay, well, what about this? Or what about that? Have you thought about these things? And so, giving them those ideas, and helping them kind of come to it themselves. It's not my plan. It's not my work. It's yours to do, but giving them the confidence and letting them know that as long as you're taking action, something's going to happen.
So Meg, in the business coaching side of things, there's also the leadership aspect. And I was wondering, what are some of the main things that you talk to someone about leadership and how they can be a better leader?
I think the biggest thing is, as a leader is, we oftentimes are the ones that really see the vision. We see the horizon before many people do. And, I think a lot of times that as leaders, we expect everybody else to see that same vision, but we don't effectively communicate that down. And so I think one of the biggest things is that as a leader, I think it's really important to be able to be as transparent as you can, knowing that there is some things that, for confidentiality reasons or whatever season is in the business that you can or cannot share. But I think people appreciate the fact that if you're in the messy middle of business and everything is not going appropriately, if you can just share maybe why a little bit is, where you're struggling, and just, communicate that to them. And they will ultimately, I think that will endear them to you, and being able to show that you are real, that you are a person, that this is why we're doing the things that we're doing in order to get through, where we're going to next. And so I think understanding what the problem is, identifying said problem, understanding that we are in the middle of trying to, fix this problem. And in order to fix that problem, we're going to have to do these steps, X, Y, and Z. And you have to continually communicate that to people, because a lot of times, they may hear it for the very first time and they have no idea how to process that. And that's another thing I think too, is understanding your team and who you are leading. And one of the biggest things I also do is personality assessments, and being able to identify what types of personality, through like a DISC assessment or through a Myers-Briggs assessment or through, say, the Enneagram, which are all different types of personality traits testing. And so to me, they're all things that can clue you in to who you are as a leader yourself. I think you have to know yourself as a leader, who you are, what type of leader are you? And if this is the type of leader you are, then how can you be able to effectively communicate to others that are different than you, and you need? And so like for me on the DISC assessment, I'm a high D, high I. And what does that mean? That means, that I'm a driver, and that, high D, is very direct. A driver, can be intense at times, and oftentimes, a little bit overbearing. But then I'm also an I, which is a high I means I'm an influencer, that I'm able to connect with people. And, I really can identify, some of your problems, and, or we can connect on something, as simple as, what type of dog you have. And the fact that if your dog has had surgery and, if there's something that, you're unsure about, we can talk about your dog. I'm not here to just talk about your horse, but I'm here to talk about your dog too. And, how we can connect on that. And those kinds of things, I think, really help you as a leader to be that person and be a real person. So often
Mm-hmm.
there's this misperception of I can't lead people, and tell them everything. You don't have to tell them everything, but I think you can lead people effectively, but also somewhat pull the curtain back a little bit and say, this is what I'm dealing with, and this is why. And if they can see a little bit of the map and where they're going, they're not nearly as, as intimidated, and not nearly as, I feel like when people are in the dark, that's when, different types of scenarios start and their head just starts spinning and spinning out of control. And they make up things that aren't even true, but they can't help it because they just don't know. And so it's a natural tendency for when we don't know, we make up all these things, and ultimately it might not even be true, but we make ourselves believe it's true. And so I think that's the thing I would tell a leader to do is know who you are, identify the type of leader that you are, and then be a transparent leader.
Mm-hmm. And I think especially if you've got to have the buy-in from the people who are doing the day-to-day work of making your company run. And how can they have the buy-in if they don't know what the goals are or what you're trying to accomplish or how you're trying to accomplish it? If they're just told, this is what you're going to do and this is how you do it, and then they don't know anything else, why would they bother to, keep going and care about it? So yeah, I think that's good advice.
Yeah. And so while we're talking about this, because something came up the other night that I was watching, do you think two things? Do you think that there's a difference between a boss and a leader? And do you think somebody can be both of those?
Absolutely. I do think there's a difference between a boss and a leader. The biggest difference is a leader is going to be someone that can see your strengths and really be able to help coach and adapt into what is needed. It may not be in that moment in time, but I can look at people that I have led and I can see talent in someone that I know is going to be, really successful at one point in their career, but they just haven't had enough coaching. They haven't had enough training. They haven't had the experience per se, but I can see that there's a gem there. And, I see that a lot in a lot of the salespeople that I've worked with over time. And it's really fun to watch them come in, as young salespeople, just learning the business and learning the ropes and identifying what their accounts are like and what they do and how they go about that. But then really molding those people into like becoming, asking more questions, being a lot more focused on your customer and identifying that. And so, I've watched people do that for many years. And that's really where my coaching, kind of, how can I get, if this is what you want to do, how can you get to that next level, whether it be in marketing or whether it be in sales or whether it be, moving into, a brand manager, however that looked. I could identify those people. And I think as a leader, that's our role. It's like, we need to serve our people in a way that, especially if we hold a leadership role, is understand your people and look for the gems and look for the things that they're good at. And if you can do that, then ultimately you'll both be rewarded because, if I can get you to where you want, then ultimately that's the biggest reward because that's what I want for you. And I think that's really, really important, when you think about, how to move people in that direction and what is our responsibility as leaders is to be able to serve the people that work with us and alongside of us and be able to do the best of our ability each and every day.
Do you think there's a way that we can shift people from thinking that they're working for a boss versus working for a leader?
The biggest thing is that you need to identify what it is that you value in a boss, and take those traits. And to me, you need to multiply that times 5 and the multiplier of 5. And the reason I say that is because, to me, when I look at a person and I say, okay, if these are the traits that you want, this is what's going to take. Your boss is going to tell you what to do, but your leader is going to show you how to do it and take you underneath their wing. And they're going to say, this is how you go about it in the best way that they can, whether it's them actually directly leading you or it's like, no, actually, this is who I want you to talk to. I want you to sit down with this person and I want you to go work with this person and learn from this individual. They're going to help you with those stepping stones along the way, where a boss is just going to say, I need you to get this done. They don't necessarily care about how you're going to go about it, who you're going to be with doing it, and really the training in which you're going to be able to get it done. They're also not going to sit down and care about the path that you're going to do stuff with. To me, anytime I've sat down with what I would consider a true leader, one of my former bosses that when I was working at Big Pharma Group, I sat down and he was the North American head, and he came to me and he sat me down and and said, I watched you, Meg, work with different people all across the country, And, what I can see is that, you are a star when it comes to, being able to interact with people and that kind of thing. But one thing I am concerned about with you is you're traveling 40 weeks out of the year and you're about to be a mom. And I'll never forget that. And he just coming up to me and saying, I want to understand what your priorities are right now. And because I don't want to lose you as a star, but I also know that your priorities are about to shift, probably more than you, because he has 3 girls himself. And so to sit down and say that to me, and I will never forget him doing that. And, just taking the time to say, this is a season of your life that you're not going to be able to travel 40 weeks out of the year. You need to be home. You need to think about, you think you can do it all right now, but I promise you, when the rubber meets the road, it's going to be hard to leave that little girl. And I will never forget. And that was in June of 2015. She was born in July of 2015. And I came back and I went to a big conference in Las Vegas. And I'll never forget being away from her for the very first time and just how hard that was for me. And he was at that meeting and he came up to me and he looked at me and he says, "You look great." He's like, "How is it?" And I literally just burst out in tears. And I was like, I said, "I don't want to be away from her." He said, "I told you so." So I think for me, that understanding those moments and really, and he said, "Okay, so we didn't really talk about transition because I wanted you to experience it. So now what? Now what do you want to do?" And so I think for me, that's the biggest thing is identifying somebody like that could see it before I could and understood that, but knew that he wanted to keep me and really wanted to be able to help my career and shape who I was, and he was one that, also handed me a book that I'll never forget either. And, it was another John Maxwell book, and it was called Leadership. And so it's really shifting my leadership role and understanding that you don't have to take on everything, but you need to understand how you can delegate and be able to do the things that you need to get done. And I think that's one of the biggest things as leaders. We tend to want to take on the world. Chief everything officers, what I like to call ourselves. And being chief everything officers is, almost impossible. That task that can be so daunting when it's that way. And so for me, that was probably one of the biggest things is understanding that I couldn't do it all. I can't be a mom. I can't be a veterinarian. I can't do all this 40 weeks out of the year. How am I going to balance all this? And understanding in this season of my life, I have to shift. And I've continued to be able to do that. And then it's also helped me create some boundaries. What am I willing to do and what am I not willing to do? And once I understood those things, it really has been able to change what I do on my day-to-day.
I love that. Well, we thank you so much for speaking with us about leadership and what you do and how you've come to grow your own business. And at the end of each episode, we ask the same 4 questions to each guest, and Connor starts with the first.
What is one action that women can take to make a big difference in their lives?
I think the biggest thing you can do is be intentional. Be intentional about what you do. And whatever it is, whatever you take time to do, just make sure that you're being really intentional with your time, because that is the most precious thing in the world is, and we as women tend to take on the world. And so being intentional about what I'm going to do with my time in that moment is so important. And if I can share that with any person, that would be the one thing I would tell someone.
And what is the best habit that keeps you motivated personally?
I think the best habit is really being able to continuously learn, is I'm always learning. And I think, I'm a lifelong learner and, always trying to learn something new every day, and I think that if you continue to do that, you'll continue to grow.
Great.
What's your favorite horse movie?
My very favorite horse movie is Seabiscuit. Absolutely love Seabiscuit. It's one of my favorites, always cheering for the underdog and being able to see that, it's just one of those that, that's probably, when I think about myself, sometimes I often think of that and people are like, "What? How do you think that?" And I said, well, I think it's just one of those things where you kind of come from behind, a lot of times, and, people underestimate you. They're just not sure. And I know when I got into industry, for instance, I was one of the youngest tech services veterinarians. I was told when I graduated from veterinary school, you do not need to think about this job and going to industry until you've been in practice for at least 15 to 20 years. And I thought, whoa, that's a lot,
Yeah.
Not that I didn't want to be, I thought, well, that's my whole career. I mean, that's half my career right there.
Yeah.
And, and it's fine, but I wanted to beat the odds. And so I continuously networked and I continuously talked to people and, wanted to understand how I could go about that. And so was able to get the opportunity when the time was right. And I became a tech services veterinarian. I was one of the youngest in the industry, overall, but I had seen quite a bit again, because I'd been at Reed and Riddle and being able to have that strong foundation. And so, was able to catapult into industry and, within 5 years, of being, a veterinarian. So I'm really excited about that, and it's continued to serve me well.
Yeah. And who would you recommend to be a future guest on this podcast?
I would say my own personal mentor, if I had to tell you that. Her name is Dr. Cynthia McKenzie, and she has been one of my biggest supporters and someone who I've always looked up to and admired.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much again for joining us and helping us learn more about what you do. We love talking to you.
Thank you for this opportunity. I certainly appreciate that. And if I can be of help to either one of you or any of your guests, please don't hesitate to reach out.
I thought it was really interesting to speak with Meg today and, how she coaches people. And she gave such concrete examples and information that I thought was really helpful. And I loved hearing the people that she's worked with and how she works with them. And I thought there were a couple key things that stood out to me were the communication versus connection and her dad's advice to fail fast.
Yeah.
I don't think I've really heard that before, so I liked that.
Yeah, no, I hadn't heard that before either, but I mean, it kind of makes sense, right? Get it over with.
Yeah, don't drag it out forever. I mean, if it's sucks and you're doing badly, just end it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I like that.
Yeah. And I think that there's always another direction for you to go in too, like you don't have to, I kind of think that goes along with what Laura said in our very first episode about don't keep sinking.
Yeah.
Right. But this is like another way to say
it. Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, I thought, there was so much to gain. And I love that, she has that certification behind her and that education. And she said she's a lifelong learner and being able to share that. And I think it's important with the certification. And sometimes you just need people to bounce ideas off of or talk it through with someone, and to have someone who can kind of lead you through it with really good examples of how to set it up.
Yeah. The SMART goals for me.
Yeah.
Were really, I've used that in the past, and honestly, I can get obsessive about it and break down. If I'm like sitting around and I don't have a lot to do, I'm like, oh, let me make SMART goals about every single part of my life. And I'm like, oh, this and this and this. I have like all these lists. They don't always get done, but you know, like I feel like a little more inspired after I sit down and do those SMART goals, And then the other thing that we were talking about that's interesting to me was at the end when we were talking about a boss versus a leader. Because the other night I was on the internet and I saw this cartoon, and it was like a pack of dogs, and there was a dog that was drinking water, and that dog was like growling and snarling at all the other pack of dogs and wouldn't let them drink. So this other dog came and broke ice on the other side of the pond, and all the dogs followed him over and they were all drinking out of it. And that was their example of a boss versus a leader. So for somebody who's in leadership, I found it interesting, how she talked about like leaders try and promote their people and try and help their people and
show them instead of tell them.
Yeah. And, I do think that helps. And also for a boss, for a leader to be able to recognize, okay, you know what, this person is really good at what they do, but I want to help them fulfill their own self-worth, self-goals, whatever it may be. So let me, at the risk of maybe losing them for that particular job I need them for, but letting them grow as a person is more important to them. I think that that's really a good part of a leader.
Yeah. Seeing people's potential and helping them find it and realize it.
Yeah. And I think that for me, I just would love that instead of we always call somebody who's above us our boss, I would love to see us be able to refer to them as our leaders.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if they
the
deserve
shoe
it.
fits.
Exactly. If they deserve it, if they're not just a boss, you know,
Right.
and telling you what to do, but if they are helping you grow as a person, it would be nice that instead of that title, it's, oh, my boss did this or my boss did that. That's why I kind of asked her if she thought a boss and a leader could be the same person, because we always refer to our boss, right? But, you know, like for me, I feel like the person, my boss is not a boss. He's really a leader for me.
That's great to hear.
Yeah.
Well, that was great. I think, you know, we have so many different topics, and I think this one really worked well with past episodes and kind of callbacks to things. I think we have that in every episode, so that's cool to see.
Yeah, it's great to see like there's common themes between a lot of what everybody's saying, which it just helps hammer home the points of it, right?
Yeah, and then you're on the right track.
Yeah. So, well, we are on the track to end this episode. So find the links to today's guests and the show notes at www.eqbusinesswomen.com. Equestrian B2B is out twice a month on the 1st and the 15th.
You can find out more at eqbusinesswomen.com and follow us on Facebook and Instagram. Find Equestrian B2B wherever you get your podcasts, and be sure to follow, subscribe, and leave a review. You can have all 20 plus shows of the Horse Radio Network with you wherever you go with their free app for iPhone and Android. Go to your app store and search Horse Radio Network.
Now go be an effective leader.